Hey all, you're about to learn the 5 best chess opening traps in the Queen's Gambit, which occurs after the first moves pawn to d4, pawn to d5, and it's one of the most popular gambit of all in chess.
By the way, here's the channel, all you need. If you like the videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe us.
I'm gonna show you the 5 opening traps. Some of them are classical and you might have seen them already, and if you're more advanced, which may be something interesting and maybe the way for you to surprise your opponent. But let's start from something really classical, in case black accepts the gambit and then tries to hold this pawn and not give it back to white. The way to do this is by playing pawn to b5. Do you know how can white refute this attempt of black? White should do this by playing pawn to a4, trying to undermine this b5 pawn, which currently supports the extra pawn of black on the c4. And now what can black do? If black tries the symmetrical response, pawn to a6, it does not really work because after white captures the pawn, black can't recapture because the pawn is pinned. In this case, he will just lose that rook on a8. Now let's see what else can black do. Other than that, black can play pawn to c6, and here it looks like everything is just fine for black, but nevertheless he's actually losing. White should trade the pawns onto b5, and here there is a winning continuation. Can you find it? By the way, there was a funny thing that this position happened once in the game of the 4th world chess champion, Alexander Alokhin, and he actually missed to find the winning move, quite, surprisingly. If you can find it, let me know in the comments below. Maybe you just know this because it's a theoretical line. It's move queen to f3. A bit of a sudden move, and there is no way for black to save his rook, which is a very, sudden situation, so white just wins the game right on the spot. Alright, so that's been the first trap, pretty classical one, and nevertheless I've just checked in the database that up to this date, strong players up to 2000 rated and beyond keep falling into this trap, and therefore even if you know this, it does not necessarily mean that your opponents know it, so you can still go ahead and give it a try. Let's move on to the trap number 2. As we already know, here after white plays pawn to c4, offering this pawn for black, if black tries to take it and then keep this pawn by playing pawn to b5, it does not really work. And therefore, instead, black normally would just continue his development by playing something like knight to f6. Therefore, he can take back the pawn. And here, some players really love to fianchetto their kingside bishop, and they play pawn to g6. It's not the main line, and yet it's something relatively common that your opponents may play. And here there is one interesting thing that you can do. After the next natural moves, knight to f3 and bishop to g7, instead of making another natural development move, you can try one sudden thing. It's a move queen to a4 check. And at first it seems like just some weird, uncalled for move, and yet it's not that easy for black to react properly. Let's find out what's the reason. In case black plays bishop to d7, for example, white can go back with his queen to b3, and as you may notice, this is actually a double attack to black's f7 and b7 pawns. White can even increase the pressure by putting his knight to e5 on the next move, and therefore it's somewhat unpleasant for black. Therefore, the most natural reaction for black is probably not the best one. Let's see what else can black try. In case black moves his knight to c6, there's something relatively similar that may happen. White may jump with his knight to e5, taking advantage of the pin over this knight, and currently the white's knight from e5 attacks the pawn on f7 together with his bishop from c4, and also it attacks the black's knight on c6, and therefore there is no way for black to protect both of these weaknesses simultaneously. Therefore, another natural reaction for black, which was knight to c6, is also somewhat not exactly the best. Let's see what else can he do. What if he plays queen to d7? This time let me ask you, what do you think about this case? Can you find the winning continuation for white here? If you can, write it down in the comments below, I'll give you a few seconds for that. There is a really crushing move, bishop takes f7, boom, and it wins the game right on the spot because if black takes the bishop, there follows knight to e5, which is a fork to the black's king and queen. Pretty interesting. Let's go back. Is there any way for black to escape? Of course there is, but it's not that easy for black to find out. Let's also take a look at the move knight to d7. Interestingly enough, white can still use the exact same tactics, which is bishop takes f7, even though this time the motif is different. After black recaptures, white can go ahead with knight to g5 check. And here there is no good continuation for black, because if the black's knight goes somewhere to f8 or to e8, somewhere here, in either case, white continues with his knight to e6, which wins the black's queen on d8, has no escape square. And if black tries to retreat with his king to g8, then the black's queen is alright, but after the white plays queen to c4, black can't escape the coming queen f7 checkmate on one of the following moves. Does it mean that it's already that the hope is already lost for black? Well, of course not. The position is still very much playable, and the easiest way for black is just to play his pawn to c6, and he's totally safe. But what I like about this trap for white is that you're not really spoiling your position in any way. You just need to be careful because black is ready to play pawn to b5, attacking your pieces. Therefore, you just need to play queen b3, attacking that pawn on f7, and the normal game goes on. That's what I really like about this trap. You're not spoiling your position, it's still a very much normal game, and you just keep playing. Alright, that's been another trap, not very well known, and therefore you have a realistic chance to win a couple games just by using this trap alone. And here we go with the trap number 3. Here is the starting position of the Queen's Gambit once again. And by the way, in case you don't play Queen's Gambit normally, and maybe you're interested in some other opening traps, just let me know in the comments below and I may record another video about this. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss out on the new videos. Alright, as we have seen, black can't really accept this gambit pawn and then hold it, and therefore the most classical continuation for black is just to play pawn to e6 and continue his development as normal. And at this position there is another classical trap. This time black can set this trap, and again this is a must-know really thing. It is the move knight to d7. I remember when I joined the chess club many years ago, and when I went there for the very first time, some tricky guy actually set this trap and I fell right into it because I didn't know that, black is not that naive to give up the pawn. Anyway, I'm gonna show you the traps so that just to make sure that you know it as well. At this position, it may seem like black just overlooked that due to this pin, white can actually grab this pawn on d5. It seems like white just won the pawn and everything's great, but it's not that easy. Black can recapture by the knight, and after white takes the queen and it seems like everything's just great, black has this counter blow bishop b4 check. And it turns out that there is no other way for white to cover his king other than just playing queen to d2. So white has to give his queen back, and then at the end of this forcing line, black is a piece up. He has this additional knight which gives him a winning material advantage. Another absolutely must-know trap. This time black can set it, and it's also one of the things which every chess player should really know. There we go with the trap number 4. This time I've flipped the board because this trap is also for black. You can use it in case you're playing black. So the first moves are still the same. Let's say you tried this trap, but your opponent was wise enough not to fall into it and not to accept this poisoned pawn, and instead he played some normal move like pawn to e3. In this case, there is still one more trick that you may employ. You may play pawn to c6, and then after white goes knight f3, there is one counter-attacking move that black can use here, which is queen to a5. And it's a pretty interesting continuation for black, because not only you remove your queen from this pin, of your knight, but also potentially you prepare to start some counterattack by playing knight to e4 and bishop to b4. And some of your opponents who are not really familiar with this, they will just continue playing the standard Queen's Gambit moves like bishop to d3. And in this case, your plan works out really well. You can play knight to e4 here. Notice that it's not a sacrifice, because the white's knight on c3 is pinned by your queen. White cannot take this knight by his knight from c3. Therefore, if he tries to take it with his bishop, then after the recapture there is a slight problem for white, because the knight is attacked, and if it goes back, he may lose his bishop from g5. Therefore, instead, white may just play queen to c2, and it looks like white is just playing the very standard moves, which is partially true. The only exception though is that here you can just win the game right away by playing knight takes g5, and then after white recaptures, all of a sudden you have this discovered attack along the 5th rank. You're attacking the knight and simultaneously you're attacking his bishop by the pawn. Therefore, after white recaptures the pawn, you just grab the knight and you're happily winning. And now there is the final 5th trap for today's video. The standard starting moves are still the same: d4, d5, pawn to c4, and here there's one more tricky line that black may use, which is pawn to e5, so-called Albin counter-gambit. And it's a pretty decent opening choice for black, especially for blitz games. I saw, for instance, Morozevich, one of the Russian grandmasters, won numerous amount of games in the internet just by playing this opening line. The idea is that after white accepts the pawn, you push your pawn forward to d4, and it gives you some space advantage. It takes away the c3 square from the white's knight, therefore the white's development is a little bit clumsy at this point, and also it gives you a lot of freedom for your pieces. They can now move forward freely, which gives you quick development and very active position. In this position there is one natural reaction for white, which is not the best. It's pawn to e3, trying to eliminate this intruder, the black's pawn on d4, which is somewhat annoying for white. It's not the best choice, but even if white plays the correct move, knight to f3 instead, the position of black is still absolutely playable and you can just go on with the standard continuations. Anyway, let's see what you can do in case white plays pawn to e3, which is a very usual response for your opponents in case they're not really familiar with the opening theory of this line. Instead of capturing the pawn, you can go bishop b4 check. And after white covers his king by bishop d2, here comes the surprise. Instead of trading the bishops, you just take pawn takes e3. And here, what can white do? He can't recapture by the bishop because the bishop has to cover the king. And at the same time, it may seem like black just, blundered the bishop. So what if white simply grabbed the bishop? There comes pawn takes f2 check, therefore white must move the king. The king can't grab the pawn because in this case he will lose the queen on d1. Therefore white must do something else, and there is not much that white can do. He has to play king to e2. And in this position, if black just again makes one of the natural moves, either trades the queens on d1 or let's say creates a new queen here, then after an exchange of queens white will grab this queen back, and we've got an approximately equal position of an endgame. Everything seems to be quite standard. But there is a tricky thing that black can play here, which white usually overlooks. In this position, in addition to grabbing the knight and promoting a new queen, which we usually do while promoting a pawn, black can promote this pawn into a knight, which is a check to the white's king. That's an important point. And therefore, after white takes this knight, you just continue with bishop g4 check. And again, you're not going to trade off the queens, you're going to win it for nothing after white goes away, and then you just grab this this queen either by your bishop or queen, and you're winning the game. It's a classical trap that you need to know, and again, what I like about all these traps is that you can play them freely, meaning that even if your opponent is smart enough not to fall into these traps, you just continue playing as if nothing happened. You continue playing usual chess. If you enjoyed these traps, don't forget to give a like to this video to encourage me to create even more videos on similar subjects. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.